For 6 minutes, the world heard almost nothing, as Orion hit Earth's atmosphere at roughly 35 times the speed of sound. A layer of superheated plasma wrapped itself around the capsule and cut the Artemis II crew off from mission control. To most people, that silence was just a normal part of re-entry. But for space audiences, it became something bigger. Because a few days earlier, 4 human beings had gone out to the moon, flown within about 470 miles of its surface, and come home with a reminder that our picture of the moon is still incomplete. Not because NASA is hiding aliens, not because Apollo lied, but because the difference between a world studied through instruments and a world seen by trained human eyes is bigger than most people realize. And that is where this gets interesting. If you like calm, evidence-first space documentaries, you can softly help this video reach more people with a like. And if you end up wanting more of this kind of work, subscribing is the easiest way to tell YouTube that serious space content still matters. Artemis II was not a landing mission. Nobody planted a flag. Nobody brought home rocks. This was a crude deep space test flight designed to push Orion around the moon and back, prove the systems, and prepare for the missions that come next. But sometimes test flights reveal something more important than a checklist. Sometimes they reveal where our assumptions were too simple. The spacecraft reached its closest point to the lunar surface on April 6, 2026. Inside the capsule, the crew commander, Reid Wiseman, pilot Victor Glover, and mission specialists Christina Koch and Jeremy Hansen divided into pairs, with 2 astronauts observing for roughly hour-long windows while the other pair worked other tasks. That sounds procedural, almost boring. But in space exploration, boring is often where the real story begins. Because once you place trained observers at the windows of a spacecraft moving through lunar space, something subtle changes. A photograph records light. A human observer compares, notices, and questions. A camera may preserve detail, but a trained brain catches relationships, depth, texture, lighting. The moment something looks slightly wrong, one of the biggest surprises was not some secret structure on the far side. It was the moon's shape itself. People talk about the moon as if it is visually simple, grey, flat, dead. But that familiarity is deceptive. The closer you get, the more the surface stops looking like a flat image and starts looking like a violent world frozen in layers of damage. Crater rims rise with a scale that photographs flatten. Basin walls feel wider. Slopes feel sharper. Along the terminator, where sunlight strikes at a low angle, every ridge throws long shadows and every depression turns black. Terrain that seems gentle from Earth suddenly looks severe. That matters for a simple reason. The next phase of lunar exploration is not about admiring the moon. It is about trying to survive on it. And that brings us to one of the most important questions around this mission. Is the moon too dangerous for a permanent base? Before I answer that, tell me what you think in the comments. If you had to choose right now, would you build the first long-term base near the lunar South Pole? Or would you wait for far more impact and terrain data first? I'm genuinely curious where you land on that. One reason this question is suddenly everywhere is the reports of impact flashes. During the flyby, the crew reported seeing brief flashes on the darkened lunar surface. That detail grabbed people immediately because it turns an abstract fact into a visual shot. We all know intellectually that the moon gets hit. But seeing impacts during a single observation window changes the emotional meaning of the place. It stops feeling like a museum object and starts feeling like exposed ground under constant attack. And that fear is not irrational. Here on Earth, the atmosphere acts like armor. Small incoming particles burn and vanish before they ever become our problem. The moon has no such shield. What approaches the surface arrives hard and fast. That does not mean a lunar base is impossible. It means every habitat design and every emergency protocol has to be built around a truth that Apollo never had to solve at long-term scale. On the moon, the environment is always trying to break you. This is why the engineering version of the Artemis story is more interesting than the conspiracy version. The real revelation is not that astronauts saw something forbidden. It is that every new human look at the moon gives planners survival information. Surface roughness, illumination angles, and impact frequency are all survival information. The moon does not care whether a mission is historic. It only responds to physics. And physics is also what makes one of the moon's strangest features so compelling. Reiner Gamma, Reiner Gamma is a bright swirl on the Moon's near side, visible even with backyard telescopes. It is not a crater or a mountain chain. It is bright because of differences in how the surface has weathered. These lunar swirls are like the Moon's tan lines. Solar radiation gradually darkens the surface, but localized magnetic anomalies act like a magnetic sunscreen, protecting some regions while redirecting charged particles toward others. The result is a bright and dark pattern traced across the surface like an abstract painting. The Moon may be wearing the visible imprint of invisible magnetic complexity, not magic, not a cover-up, just a world stranger than a quick glance suggests. That is exactly why Artemis II matters. Restoring human observation cannot be fully replaced by robotic missions. Instruments are patient and precise, but humans are exceptional at pattern recognition in messy, changing scenes. We notice relationships in light. We feel scale differently. We catch what does not quite fit the model yet. So when people ask, what did Artemis II really see? The most honest answer is this. They saw a moon that is less finished in our understanding than we wanted to believe. They saw a world whose colors change meaningfully with lighting and angle. They saw terrain whose three-dimensional severity matters for every future landing. They saw that the surface is still being modified, not geologically alive like Earth, but continually processed by impacts and radiation. Now let's come back to those 6 minutes of silence. At 7:53 p.m. Eastern, on April 10, Orion reached Earth's atmosphere traveling 35 times the speed of sound. The crew entered a planned communications blackout as plasma built around the capsule. Communications were re-established at 8:01 p.m., and the spacecraft splashed down in the Pacific at 8:07 p.m. Eastern. I love that detail because it sounds cinematic, yet it is just re-entry physics. The spacecraft returns from the Moon. The atmosphere turns savage. The capsule becomes a fire-wrapped object falling through ionized gas. And for a few minutes, the people inside disappear behind a shield made of heat. That is the real mood of Artemis. Not fantasy, not propaganda. A machine built by thousands of people carries 4 astronauts to lunar space and back. They pass through a region where everything matters: angle, timing, and human endurance. They observe a world that still resists simplification. Then they come home through plasma and parachutes. If you've made it this far, and you want to support videos like this beyond the algorithm, things like Super Thanks or Patreon genuinely help. I want to keep making calm, careful space films that don't have to shout to hold attention. For more than half a century, the Moon has been iconic but emotionally distant. Mars and black holes sounded dramatic, while the Moon felt settled. Artemis II disrupted that mood. Not because the Moon changed, but because our relationship to it changed the moment human beings went back and looked with fresh urgency. The lunar South Pole is no longer just a map target. It is a place where future crews must land in rough, high-contrast terrain near water ice. A swirl like Reiner Gamma is no longer just a curiosity. It is a clue to how solar wind and magnetic anomalies interact. Impact flashes are direct reminders that a future habitat has no protective atmosphere. The smartest way to talk about Artemis II is not to ask what was being hidden, but to ask what the Moon was still able to teach us. Apollo proved we could reach the Moon. Artemis is beginning the much harder task of figuring out whether human beings can work there repeatedly and safely. Those are different missions, so they reveal different truths. The truth Artemis II gives us is that Moon is operationally harsher and scientifically less exhausted than the public version suggested. That is better than a fake secret. Fake secrets die fast. Real complexity keeps paying off. The next missions are where that payoff becomes concrete. Every image and observation feeds forward. Future crews will not just inherit inspiration, they will inherit better odds of survival. When a crew goes to the Moon and comes back safely, engineers see data and scientists see fresh questions. The Moon stops being history. It becomes a destination with unfinished business. I do not think Artemis II revealed a forbidden secret. I think it revealed something more valuable. It reminded us that the Moon is still capable of correcting us. It corrected our sense of scale and our sense of danger. It corrected the lazy idea that there is nothing left to learn. The Moon is not done with us yet. Maybe the most important image from Artemis II is that 6-minute silence on the way home, a brief moment when the capsule vanished behind plasma, carrying 4 people and everything they had just learned, before emerging again with the signal restored. If that is not exploration in its purest form, I don't know what is. Before you go, leave me one answer in the comments. Do you think Artemis II made the case for a permanent moon base stronger, or did it reveal just how dangerous that future really is? If this is the kind of space storytelling you want more of, I'd love to have you here for the next one.